chapter, planting the seed. So the first one is to systematically propagate spiritual knowledge to society at large and to educate all peoples in the techniques of spiritual life in order to check the balance of values in life and to achieve unity and peace in the world. 2. Propagate consciousness of Krishna as it is revealed by the intention of that. 3. To bring in members of society together with each other near to Krishna, private entity, thus to develop the idea within members and humanity at large that each soul is part and parcel of the quality of Godhead Krishna. To teach and encourage the Sankirtan movement, congregational chanting of the holy name of God as revealed in the teachings of the Lord Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. 5. To erect for the members and for society at large a holy place of transcendental pastime. With a view toward achieving the aforementioned purposes, to publish and distribute periodicals, magazines, books, and other writings. Regardless of what ISKCON's charter members thought of the society's purposes, Bhaktivedanta Swami saw them as imminent realities. As Mr. Rubin, the subway conductor who had met Bhaktivedanta Swami on a Manhattan park bench in '65, had noted, he seemed to know that he would have temples filled up with devotees. There are temples and books, he said. They are existing, they are there, but the time is separating us from them. Certainly none of his early followers who signed his articles of incorporation for ISKCON saw any immediate shape to the Swami's dream. Yet these 7 purposes were not simply theistic rhetoric invented to convince a few New York State government officials. Bhaktivedanta Swami meant to enact every item in the charter. Srila Prabhupada ki. And he did. Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Reading from Sri Caitanya Caritamrta, Madhya Lila, chapter 19, entitled The Lord Instructs Srila Bhagiswami, beginning from text 103. So I'll just go through the verses until we get to a purport. Balya Poganda Kaishori Shrestha Manakaya Vaya Kaishura Kam Jayam Ka Upajaya. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked, of the 3 ages of Krishna, known as childhood, boyhood, and fresh youth, which do you consider best? Raghupati Upajaya replied, fresh youth is the best age. Rasaga Gana Maji Tumi Shrestha Manakaya Adya Eva Paro Rasa Kai Upajaya. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked, among all the mellows, which do you consider best? Raghunath Upajaya replied, the mellow of conjugal love is supermost. Prabhu Kahi Bali Tadva Shikaila More Itabali Shloka Padi Gadgada Sware. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then said, you have certainly given first-class conclusions. After saying this, he began to recite the full verse in a faltering voice. Swayam eva param rupam puri madhu puri vara vaya kaishorakam jayam adya eva parorasa. The form of Shyamsundar is the supreme form. The city of Mathura is the supreme abode. Sri Krishna's fresh youth should always be meditated upon, and the mellow of conjugal love is the supreme mellow. Purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki. This verse is found in the Pajavali 82. Anyone get any questions?
What's the age range of fresh youth?
Sorry, we're out of time. Which is the age?
Do you know the actual, how old that is?
I did, but I forgot. Does anybody know specifically what that age group is? It's called Yovanam, isn't it?
I thought Russian was 16, but it's just a half year younger.
Yeah, is it between 14 and 16? Or is it 16?
16, I thought 16.
Okay, Vrinda's going to Google it. Okay, we'll carry on. Prema Vishe Prabhu Tanri Kaila Alingana Prema Mata Hana Tenho Karina Nartana Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then embraced Raghupati Upajjhai in ecstatic love. Raghupati Upajjhai also was overwhelmed by love and he began to dance. Text 108. Deki Valabha Bhatta Mani Chamatkara Haila Dui Putra Ani Prabhura Charane Padila. Vallabha Bhattacharya was struck with wonder to see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Raghupati Upajjhai dance. He even brought forward his two sons and made them fall down at the Lord's lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The two sons of Vallabhacharya were Gopinath and Vitaleshwara. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu visited Prayag in the year 1434 or 1435 Shakabda era, AD 1512 or 1513, Vitaleshwara was not yet born. In this regard, one should see Madhya-lila 1847. Due to the fear of the Muslims, Gopal went to Mathura, where he remained in the house of Vitaleshwara for 1 full month. So here in the purport, then he goes on about the dates again. Vallabha had two sons. Elder Gopinath was born in 1432, Shakabda, and the younger Vitaleshwara was born in 1437 and died in 1507. Vitaleshwara had 7 sons: Giridhar, Vrinda, Balakrishna, Gokul, Lesh, Raghunath, Yadunath, and Ganesham. Vitaleshwara completed many of his father's unfinished books, including his commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, the Subodhini commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam, Vidvan Mandana, Shringara Rasa Mandana, and Nyasadesha Vivarana. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to Vrindavan before the birth of Vitaleshwara, as previously mentioned. Srila Bhagiswami was very old at the time Gopal stayed at the house of Vitaleshwara. You had something else, brother?
Yeah, Krishna's 16, it was called Kaishara, and Radharani is 14 years, 2 months, 15 years.
Between the ages of 11 and 16.
What's that?
11 and 16.
Between 11 and 16. Interesting here. Okay, Om Gyana Tamaranda Shyagan Janan Shalakaya Chakrim Latamina Tajma Shigrave Namaha Bakam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Lagayate Grimya Kripa Tamam Vande Shigrim Saranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu-Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So here in this verse, Vallabha was struck with wonder to see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Raghupati Upajjhai dance. He even brought forward his two sons and made them fall at the Lord's lotus feet. So this was, we often see this in Caitanya Caritamrta, that Lord Caitanya, simply by his presence or by his kirtan or by some other merciful, miraculous event, then he causes people to be ecstatic, and then when people meet those people, they become ecstatic, and then when they meet those people, they become ecstatic. So this is the effect of the devotee. This is the effect of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Lord in the guise of a devotee. So the effect of the devotee is that one becomes inspired, and one becomes encouraged to go forward, to take shelter of Krishna. Not that one is thinking, oh, I want to give this up. The effect of a devotee is not like that. The effect of association like that is materialistic. If one is feeling discouraged about devotional service, then they're taking the wrong association. Or we're seeing things wrongly. Just like sometimes we go by feeling, but going by feelings on the platform of the mind. Because what are the three traits of the mind, anybody? Folks, you give me one.
Thinking, feeling, and willing.
Correct. Thinking, feeling, and willing. So we can think something, but we might be thinking wrong. We might feel something, but we might be feeling wrong. Just because we feel strong about something doesn't mean to say it's right, does it? You know, how many people felt strongly about something and ended up in prison for doing something very wrong? And then willing, we might be even willing to do something, because usually we think about something, you know, if we consider that verse, is it 262? Jayato Vishampancham Sangasteshu Pajayate. So by Jayatam Vishayan, by meditating on the objects of the senses, then one develops attachment. Either that or else develops aversion if we don't like it. Like sometimes you might be in a supermarket and you hear a song, and it might be your least favourite song, but you can't get it out of your mind, and by hearing it and giving it some attention, it stays in your mind. You can be listening to it for days, and it could be like so annoying. Was it they call it a earworm? That's right, they call it an earworm. It's almost as if something's just drilling into your brain. And then how do they get rid of it? By listening to a different type of earworm. But the best earworm is the Maha Mantra, because it gets rid of all the other nonsense earworms. And everybody's got something going on in their mind which is just they can't shake off. So we're thinking, we're contemplating objects of the senses, either positively or negatively. Negatively means, oh, I don't want this in my mind. By giving it some attention, you're keeping it there. So the devotees have to become free from attachment and aversion. Aversion is another side of attachment, just like sometimes you see some so-called staunch, pseudo-staunch devotees that they're averse to female association or something like that, but that aversion is just showing another type of attachment. Devotees are neither averse nor attached. We see everything in relation to Krishna. We should be averse to Maya, of course, whether one is male body, female body, whatever your situation is, then the jiva is the eternal part and parcel of Krishna, and we should be able to recognize what is Maya and be averse to that, at least theoretically. So therefore, sometimes we may feel like something, but if that feeling is wrong, just like in 1966, Prabhupada gave a lecture, 26 Second Avenue, and this boy said, I feel like this and I feel like that. I feel like we're all more or less equal, and I feel like nobody should bow down to me and I shouldn't bow down to anybody. And Prabhupada says, very good, you've diagnosed your own disease. He says, oh, but I feel like this. He says, yes, but you're feeling wrongly. So just because we feel like something, what was that old hippie saying? If it feels good, do it. But what if it doesn't feel good to somebody else? What if somebody makes them feel good by chopping people's legs off? And if it's your leg that's getting chopped off, do we just say, oh yeah, well, if it makes you feel good, then go ahead? So what kind of madness would that be? So that's because there's no reference point in material society. But our reference point is Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. So if the mind comes up with something, this is the nature of the mind that comes up with something, we think, well, I don't know if this is good for my Krishna consciousness or not. So then what do? We refer to Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. What does the spiritual master say about this? What do the devotees say about this? What does the Shastra say about it? So a devotee wouldn't just think, well, I feel very strongly about this, I'm just going to do it. What kind of nonsense would that be? And this is how we overcome, this is how we transcend the mind. Transcending the mind isn't just like taking some kind of hallucinogen and then you happen to kind of see things a bit more different than we normally do. It's not that kind, that's not transcendence. Transcendence means that we overcome the influence of the mind by engaging in activities which are directed by Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. And even sometimes it may be, just like Hoksha and I were discussing yesterday, that happiness can come and go, material happiness, but the real thing which is going to sustain the devotees is their sincerity and to be content. Even the devotee can be happy in their misery, because, why is that? Yeah.
Back in the temple it says, I will consider the pain that I'm experiencing in devotional services as my greatest source of happiness, presumably give impression to Krishna.
Yeah. Anyone get any other comments on that? Because sometimes, yeah, Brenda?
The next verse of the Shikshashtra from
Ashli Shiva Padaratam Panashtamam.
that's when I always be broken hearted by being present at home. He's completely free to do anything and everything for his source and Krishna.
So that's the mood that, regardless of how we feel, it's how Krishna feels. If Krishna's got a headache and the gopis of Vrindavan offer their dust to cure Krishna's headaches because they said that's what will cure him. And because this was a story, wasn't it? That they asked some sages, Krishna had a headache, and was it Narada Muni said, what do you need? He said, I need the dust from the lotus feet of my devotees, that will cure my headache. Of course, Krishna's he's very crafty. He does things to glorify his devotees, especially his topmost devotees. So Narada says, okay, I'll go and get some dust for you. So he went to some sages, and he says, oh, we can't give you the dust. We'll go to hell if we give Krishna the dust from our feet. That would be offensive. So then he goes to the gopis of Vrindavan. Immediately they start gathering up so much dust. And they said, aren't you afraid of going to hell? He says, it doesn't matter if we go to hell as long as Krishna's headache is cured. So this is Krishna's way of glorifying his devotees. So this is, of course, on a very, very high platform. If we try to prematurely act on that platform, we'll fall down because we're not actually on that level of purity or of devotion. We have to advance by gradual steps. This is called sahaja, that one acts as if they're on a much higher platform than they really are. And why do they do this?
Fame.
Yeah, fame. It's the subtle sex life is basically fame, distinction, adoration, and gain. They want to distinguish themselves as being something elevated, but if we are trained in Shastra, then we can understand, well, is this person behaving in such a way which matches what they're saying? And of course, it's Kali Yuga, so we're all hypocrites to some degree or another, but at least we have to be honest about not trying to pretend that we're some kind of liberated soul when we're not. We have to be honest about ourselves. And this is the best policy. Lord Nityananda said that the sufferings of an honest person don't last long. So even if a devotee is apparently suffering, because their intention is to get free, it's like becoming free from the attachment, it's not always an enjoyable thing, isn't it? Because we're hanging on to it. There's a bit of tension. And of course, it's just like getting a tooth out. The apprehension of going to the dentist, waiting in the waiting room, and all the rest of it, then that causes some problem in the mind. But once it's out, then you're fine. So the same with our anarthas, the unwanted things in the heart. We're thinking, maybe this anartha is not so bad. Maybe I should hang on to it. It's going to be painful getting it ripped out. But then when we go through with it, we think, oh, I'm glad I did that. I've been hanging on to that for some time. That tooth was giving me so much pain. And I think it was, what age I was probably about 10. I was in the waiting room with the dentist and they called my name up. And I got up and I walked out. I knew I'd have to go back again though, so I had to make another appointment because it was just the pain was too much to bear. And sometimes this is what happens in Kali Yuga. It's just our attachments cause us so much trouble that we know of no choice but to give them up. So in this sense, Kali Yuga is actually a very fortunate age because we're trying to enjoy, but the enjoyment which is offered in Kali Yuga is just so immediate and so gross and destructive that anyone with intelligence, they realize they have to give this up. And Prabhupada mentions that also in the Bhagavad Gita, and one of the purports that an intelligent person doesn't like to suffer. So sometimes the devotee suffering it's just the process of the jaundiced patient who is taking the cure for the sugar candy. The sugar candy tastes bitter for the jaundiced patient, but they keep on taking it, and then the natural taste, natural sweet taste is once again revived. So that is the difference. And also this is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita that for the materialist, what is material happiness is nectar in the beginning and tastes like poison in the end. So it's not very often you see some old person looking enlightened, free, and wise, and free from attachment, fear, and anger. It's not often that. Often they're not so happy. They're not in a great blissful state of mind. But when you look at older devotees, you see that that's different. But when you trace the lives of a lot of the older persons who were sense gratifiers, then they were riding on the crest of a wave of sense enjoyment, enjoying their youth to the max. And it's a very big sacrifice to make, to give up our youth to serve Krishna. But that sacrifice doesn't go unnoticed because everybody wants to enjoy their youth. But if we offer that to Krishna, just like Bhagiswami Thakur says, just give one life to Krishna and see the result. And the result will be no more bowed down to birth, death, old age, and disease. So this is the spreading the rays of the benediction moon, isn't it? Cheto darpan marjanam bhav mahadavagni nirvapanam, shuyakaira vachandrika vitaranam vijivada jivanam, anandam buddhivardhanam pratipatam purnamita swadanam sarvatma snapanam param vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years. So the things which are anarthas, we didn't even know they were anarthas. We didn't know they were unwanted things. In fact, it was opposite. They were wanted things. And the problem was how we're going to get them. How we're going to get all our desires fulfilled, crammed into this life. And sometimes we get just so many desires, it's just we can't live long enough to fulfill them all anyway. We'd have to have a few lives. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life, of repeated birth and death. So that fire of conditional life is the fire of fire of lust, right? Just like the fire, when you put fuel on it, it keeps burning. So by fulfilling desires, material desires, then we're keeping that fire of conditional life. The fire of lust is manifests in so many different ways. We can be lust after things in a gross way or in a more subtle way. It can be somebody's looking for, as we said earlier on, fame, distinction, adoration, and gain. Some people can be so austere to get some other kind of subtle material type of gain. Like they want to be some, say for example, somebody wants to win the 100 meters sprint in the Olympics. You're so austere, deny themselves so much, but at the end of it, there's a goal there. It's a material goal, and it's a very temporary thing. And if you happen to become second, then nobody even cares. Nobody knows you. But that second may have been better than 10 firsts before you. So it's such a big endeavour to achieve things in the material world, and it's easy to lose it. And then you could spend 14 years or something coming to that point where you gain something and then someone else comes along and just, they put you into oblivion. Or you get some, maybe you find a beautiful spouse and then somebody else comes along and steals that person from you. Or you find some other kind of material thing and then someone else. I've always noticed that as soon as you come into money, people start showing up and they have a kind of magnetism for like taking it off of you, in terms of like the government, other people who just, there seems to be some kind of radar out there that, okay, the temple's just had a big donation and then all of a sudden South Lanarkshire want another £100,000 for some trumped up bill or something. So it's funny that how the vultures come out, isn't it? And this is what it's like. People are just feeding off each other. We're not working together. And people are afraid to actually do what is right because they're afraid to look like an oddball. So the Sankirtan movement is a prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. So the rays of the benediction moon, can be compared to each of those little rays as a devotee, and by taking the chanting of the holy name onto the streets, to different programs, giving out the books, etc., then this is spreading the rays of the benediction moon. That benediction moon is who? Exactly. The benediction moon. And Anandam Buddhivardhanam. So that Lord Chaitanya is compassionate because he sees the living entities are capable of a higher level of enjoyment, but they're just allowing themselves to be cheated by Maya and falling into traps which are perpetuating their misery in this world. So, and he's encouraging us to just go through a little bit of discomfort and then you'll have eternal life full of bliss and knowledge. And sometimes the doubting mind can come up and think, oh, well, maybe it's just a good story. But we're not thinking that when we're having like a rip-roaring kirtan and everybody's having great fun. It's not the same as being at a football match when there's, you may be chanting for your favourite team. It's not like the same kind of bliss you experience from that. Because sometimes your team doesn't win, but Krishna's team always wins. He's Ajit. He's never defeated. Sometimes to heighten the devotee's ecstasy, he makes it out as if he's just about to get beaten, and then he comes back and then defeats the demon. Krishna is the master of drama. So therefore Krishna is all attractive. Everything we're attracted to in this material world is just a very dim, pale reflection of the attractive features of Krishna in the spiritual world. What we're looking for in terms of drama, beauty, strength, fame, knowledge, etc. Krishna has all of these in full. So whatever we're seeing in the material world is just a very minute quantity. And I don't know about anybody else, but when I first seen the Harinam in Glasgow, immediately I was attracted, and somehow I was thinking, I want to be part of that. I didn't quite realise it at the time, but looking back on it, that was what I was experiencing. And this is, Bhaktivinoda Thakur also sings that song. I can't remember which one it is, but he's talking about Lord Brahma was dancing kirtan and Lord Shiva was dancing kirtan. And some, although they could not dance, in their hearts they were dancing. So sometimes it's like that. The people out there, when they see us on Harinam Sankirtan, they might not be able to dance and join us. Some people do. You get the odd person who comes. They're very fortunate, or sometimes a bit crazy as well. And they think, oh, there's some crazies. I'm crazy, I'll join them. But sometimes this is just proof of Lord Chaitanya being the saviour of the most fallen, isn't it? And then you can be sure when people are smiling and seeing the Harinam, that means that they're devotees. I mean, they are all devotees anyway, but it means that they're connecting with that. And soon they'll be doing the kirtan. They'll be attracting as well. And this is what happened in Lord Chaitanya's time. Lord Chaitanya and associates were doing the kirtans, and people would just come across it and they become ecstatic by that connection, and they'd go home and they'd be like madmen. They wouldn't be able to speak coherently. They'd just be going, Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. And people would be seeing them and they'd go mad, and then it would just go on like that. So this spreading the rays of the benediction moon, Lord Chaitanya has given us this service. He's given us this honour and great fortune, because by doing this, we're fulfilling Lord Chaitanya's prophecy. It's not like if we don't do it, it won't happen, so what does it matter? It's not like that. It's going to happen anyway, and Prabhupada said that Lord Chaitanya wants us to get the credit. So he's given us a chance. This is our path back home. All we have to do is take what Lord Chaitanya has given to us and give it to others. And everything else is just simply a detail to support that. Just like we have this temple here. And for us, we could live in a much more simple situation. We don't really need it. Prabhupada said for the devotees, they can live in a mud hut in India. They don't need anything. But for the sake of attracting people to Krishna consciousness, then we have big temples, big projects, etc. And then people come along. Sometimes even ourselves, we wonder, oh, it's such an endeavour to maintain this. But then when you get like 100 people coming for a festival, and you see them all together dancing in kirtan, and you think, yeah, this is why we're doing it. Or we go out to some programme in Edinburgh or Glasgow or Aberdeen, and 30, 40, 50 or 100 people there, and they're all chanting, taking prasadam. Then this is the nectar, this is icing on the cake, and the devotees relish that. So we should always keep the goal in mind that our purpose here is simply to be Krishna conscious and to share that with others, encourage them to be Krishna conscious. And by helping someone get to the top of a hill, you automatically get there yourself. You don't have to worry about your own liberation, your own salvation. I remember there's one devotee, Pushkar, a very famous artist in ISKCON, and he was criticising the impersonalists. He says, they're simply interested in liberation. Liberation comes, that's mentioned also, I can't remember exactly where, but there's a story of Bhagiswami Thakur. He was chanting his japa, and one goddess came before him and offered him liberation. They were discussing, and he said, "What's your name?" And she said, "No, it was Shashti." Whatever it was anyway, was it Kaivalya? Impersonal liberation, yeah. So basically it was because there's 5 different types of liberation, and she was the personification of impersonal liberation. And as soon as she mentioned her name, he put his hands over his ears and he ran off chanting. So the devotee's not interested. Of course, this is to the extent that the devotee sees any danger, the danger of impersonal liberation. Prabhupada likens it to spiritual suicide. Just like for someone who commits suicide, you can't go back. It's quite final. Of course, there's another body to come later on and stuff, but it's not like, oh no, I made a mistake, I'll just go back to the body. No, the body's finished. That decision's been made. So spiritual suicide means if we merge into the oneness, then we can be there for a very long time. And we lose the opportunity for the higher types of liberation. So of course, when we're suffering in the material world, we think, well, being a demigod doesn't sound so bad. It's certainly better than being on the earthly platform and, short lifetime, opulence is very meager. Everything seems to be such a struggle. Wouldn't mind being a demigod. When you read about it, you think, well, that could be quite cool, actually, live for 100,000 years. And so much sense enjoyment available, and practically you live that long, you forget that you're going to die, but you do. And when that time comes, then it was just another short lifetime. So in comparison to eternity, 100,000 years is nothing. In comparison to eternity, merging into the impersonal oneness, and then because the living entity is active by nature, then it once again falls down into material world. So that was also just another flash in the pan. So, or we may become interested. So it also mentioned in Caitanya Charitamrta is that the pleasure of the demigods is like thousands of times greater than what the humans experience. We can't conceive of it. But I say that if we, Prabhupada said, if we see even a heavenly person would fall down because their beauty is so striking. But in comparison to the pleasure of the demigods, then personal liberation is even millions of times greater than the pleasure of demigods. So we can see it's very appealing. And then he says, but the pleasure of the devotee, the liberated devotee, engaged in pure devotional service is unlimitedly greater than even in personal liberation, because it's anandam buddhivardhanam, ever-increasing ocean of transcendental bliss. So if you go down Buchanan Street where all the top shops are, you don't see anybody offering anandam buddhivardhanam, £108. You don't see that. Ever-increasing ocean of transcendental bliss. What they're offering, like some overpriced T-shirt and a pair of. I overheard somebody speaking once in a business of how they were buying a pair of trainers in one shop in a girl street for £1,000, and the person was kind of boasting because they were talking about how they had a closet full of them, and I thought, what a complete waste. You're about 68-year-old or something, and you're spending thousands every week on trainers. You're not going to be able to run away from the yamas no matter how expensive your trainers are. But, and I felt quite pitiful because I thought the person is at this age in the game, they should be retiring and they should be thinking of preparing for the time of death. But instead, they kind of finally got to the point where they could try and boast about their wealth. But this is what Lord Chaitanya is offering. Eternal life full of bliss and knowledge. And this is what Prabhupada is offering. So therefore, Prabhupada was not compromising. He didn't perform some miracles to get some cheap following. He didn't speak some kind of pseudo what do you say? Some kind of pseudo philosophy just to make himself sound clever. Sometimes you see so-called swamis, they speak in riddles to make it seem as if they're really knowledgeable, but it's just to confuse. It's like one of Adhoksh's famous Sanktan lines, if you can't convince them, confuse them. But the thing is, that's done in Krishna's service. It's done with the intention is the thing, Even in law, they say that it's not always the act, it's the intention behind it. If someone does something that harms another person, if the intention was good but it was a mistake, then they won't get persecuted for it. So the intention is the main thing, and the devotee's intention is always, how can I benefit these people? They don't know that what they're doing now is, they may be enjoying it at the moment, but they're going to suffer. The karma's coming. They might be thinking they're having a good life, just swallowing a hamburger and washing it down with some booze, and then whatever else they get up to. And they don't realise that their life is simply tottering like a Kamala Dala Jala. Jivana Talamala, is that right? Yeah, so just like on a lotus leaf, maybe it's been raining and there's a little drip of water, it's about ready to fall, just on the corner of the petal, and it's just hanging there. And at any moment it may fall. So this is how fragile our life is. But we're thinking, nah, it won't fall. It won't fall. No, it's going to fall. Definitely going to fall. It's just a matter of when. It could be now. Is it going to be now? Is it going to be now? So, of course, we shouldn't be running about in fear, completely paralyzed with fear, but we should be aware that the most amazing thing in the material world is that every moment the souls are flocking to the house of death. And the foolish person thinks they will not die, so we're not thinking like that. We train ourselves to think that Any moment that may come, so let me be Krishna conscious. So the motivation is to become Krishna conscious, not to become paralyzed by fear. Because for a devotee, when death comes, it's Krishna coming in the form of liberation. That's how a devotee sees death. Krishna's coming. Externally, it may appear like this, or it may appear like that. But we see even, we take, for example, in a couple of weeks' time, 2 weeks today, it'll be Lord Nrsimhadev's appearance. We'll be having a festival here. And Hiranyakashipu, when he was being vanquished by Lord Nrsimhadev, he was experiencing great bliss. So even for the demons, when the Lord comes, then they experience bliss. So this is the devotees, that they, just as thunder and lightning happen simultaneously, when the devotee leaves this body, immediately they're in their spiritual body. So this is what the Vallabha was struck with wonder to see Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu and Raghupati Upajai dance. So this is the beauty of the Sankirtan movement. The people become attracted to this because this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead's movement. And when he dances, he makes others dance. And when those others dance, the attractive potency of the Lord is coming through that because they're dancing to the chanting of the holy name. Just like Prabhupada was talking about his Western disciples when he was first going back to India. He's saying they're not dancing and chanting. It's the chanting that makes them dance. They can't help themselves. And this is it. It's hard to stay in Maya in a kirtan. Sometimes we get into our head and we get into a bit of Maya. We might be a bit stubborn, but when the kirtan gets going, then only if you're like really, really stupidly determined would you try to avoid getting into the kirtan. And it's a great way of breaking down barriers, being in kirtan with other devotees and other persons. And we see that when we're on kirtan in the streets, the barriers are broken. And it's almost as if the spell of illusion is lifted from the minds of the living entities out there in the streets. So this is the movement of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, and as Rupa Nugas, followers of Rupa Goswami, then we are also near Matsara. We are non-envious. We're not envious of other people's temporary material good fortune out there. And we are able to then to also follow in the footsteps of the six Goswamis by being friends to both the gentle and the ruffians. So devotees, they can be friends with the most roughest type of persons, and they can also be friends with great scholars and other important persons, because they see everybody equally, that we see that this person is in this position just now, but they're eternal servant of the Lord. And I've got something to give them. I've got a great gift to give them. How can I give them it? And the devotees also, therefore, always trying to understand Desha Kalapatra. What is the time, place, and circumstance? What is the time, place, and candidate? And how to do that is simply to relate to the person. We have to relate to the person so that they will become willing to relate to us and to take the Krishna consciousness medicine. Okay, anyone get any questions or comments?
Thanks for question. You were saying an artist were attached to them or holding on. I just don't know what this is in my own life. I don't feel like I feel like there's things I want to get rid of, but they're still there. But it's how to actually work out that it's me who's holding on to them.
Yeah. Who else is it? It's easy when you speak with someone else because you can see that, but then you walk away again, then it just grows back over you. Yeah, it's it's your attachments. Nobody's forcing you to remain attached to anything. It's like Prabhupada, there was one devotee, he'd been visiting a few times, and Prabhupada said to him, so you like this Krishna conscious lifetime? He says, yes. He says, so why not come and join us? He says, oh, but I'm still attached. He says, what is that attachment? He said, speculation. He says, so you want to continue with it or you want to stop it? He says, well, I want to stop it. He says, then stop it. Now, it's not being simplistic because it is actually as simple as that. If we want to stop it, we'll stop it. And what Prabhupada is also teaching then is that if you don't stop it, it means that you don't want to stop it, not yet. So what do we want? This is the question, isn't it? And sometimes we want something which is not good for us and we know we shouldn't want it. So we have to kind of come to that point where we understand. Sometimes what happens is we use our intelligence to give up something that we're not even feeling we want to give up, but we know it's right. It's like, we could take it and say, for example, intoxication. We know intoxication is bad for you, but I'm attached to it. I don't really want to give it up, but I know I need to because the results are all negative. So we do the intelligent thing. We think, okay, I'm just going to give it up, even if I have to struggle with, withdrawal or whatever it is. Sometimes it's just a mental crutch for people to smoke cigarettes or have some other kind of intoxication. But we can use our intelligence to overcome the mind, and there may be some battle to begin with because the mind wants to hang on to that attachment because we've created a comfortable situation for the mind. That's its comfort zone. But what we have to do is find new comfort zones in Krishna consciousness where we can really get comfort, really get shelter. Because these shelters which we take pleasure in or which we take refuge in, at the time of death, they won't be able to help us whatsoever. And we can't take shelter in intoxication, illicit sex, gambling, meat eating. We can't take shelter in any of the adharmic principles or the principles which, the activities which destroy the dharmic principles. So, of course, some attachments are easier to give up than others. And ultimately, it all boils down to the fact that we're trying to enjoy separately from Krishna. So, regardless of how strongly we feel about something, if we just do the right thing, eventually, then that material fever will subside. And then the Krishna consciousness taste will awaken more and more. It's already beginning to awaken. Sometimes we don't see that because perhaps we're still suffering from withdrawal of our the things we take refuge in the material world. But as we continue to deny ourselves the things which we know are not good for our spiritual advancement, to reject everything which is unfavourable for Krishna consciousness and to accept everything which is favourable, as we continue with that, then more and more that natural taste for Krishna consciousness will awaken, and there'll be no regrets. Nobody ever became a pure devotee and regretted it. I talked to you about? Sorry, is that okay?
So sometimes a person may go into his feelings because he knows inherently that the feelings are coming from the heart, and so he misjudges them. And non-violent communication talks about a feeling is an expression of a need. So wrong identified needs cause inappropriate feelings. So if somebody is feeling something which is a wrong way, that person may be feeling sad that he's given up some attachment. He's longing for it again. The fulfillment of that attachment will not satisfy the need that he has, but it will take some, we have to do some contemplation to realize that what we're really needing is you're looking for love and personal reciprocation with somebody who's perfect and all cognizant. You're trying to find it with Agnes, your own girlfriend, So then people become confused because they're trying to follow their feelings, but they've not understood that their feelings are not properly identifying what they need is, what they really need.
Yeah, well, it's true what you're saying there is that sometimes people are going according to their feelings because it's in the heart. So it's come from the heart, but is the heart cleansed? Therefore, this Chaitodharpana marginan process is cleansing the mirror of the mind, which is cleansing the heart. That the mind's actually situated within the heart, it's not in the head. So when we're cleansing the mirror of the mind, we're cleansing the heart. And then we'll see that, as you said, sometimes we're misguided desires. But then, as the heart becomes cleansed, then the pure desires can be fulfilled. Like Prabhupada says, to become desireless is not possible. It's part of the nature of the living entity. We have desire. But to redirect our desires and to find that perfect repository who can perfectly reciprocate with us, we've been looking for that in so many relationships in the material world, and people have been looking at us for that. We haven't been able to satisfy them. They haven't been able to satisfy us. And even if somehow or another we have a very good mutual relationship with somebody, the time of death is going to dissolve that. Everything stops then. So for the devotee, they understand that there's many things in my heart which are not auspicious. So we have to purify the heart, and then our heart's desire can be fully satisfied. If what we're trying to satisfy is something which is on the outskirts of the heart, just like you may have some a light bulb and you put a shade over it, and you think the shade is the light, but then you can put different shades on it. You can give different colours, designs and things, but really what's given the light is the light bulb within. So the heart is pure. Originally, Krishna's, we're eternal part and parcel of Krishna, and just as Krishna is pure, we're also pure, but temporarily we've misidentified with these coverings, and we're thinking these are the things we have to satisfy. But by regular hearing and chanting and discussing, like we're doing just now, by doing this regularly, then we don't give in to these misguided desires of the heart. Yeah, it talks to you in Vrinda.
Yeah, Maharaj was saying that one of the problems why devotees have an artist still remaining in their hearts after they've been chanting for many years is Srila Bhaktivinoda explains that the holy name comes in through the ear. That's the best place because you have to hear the holy name first. And it's supposed to go into the heart, and then it's supposed to come up onto the tongue and the lips. But generally what happens is it goes in through the ear, and you hear it, and it comes straight out onto the tongue and the lips, and it doesn't go, it bypasses the heart, so the heart doesn't get the same cleanse. So then everything's on the mental platform. So the notice stay, and then they can even be fed. You can be feeding your notice just because you're improperly chanting. You should bypass the heart, so the heart's not going to get cleansed.
So that's why it's mentioned that inattentiveness is the root cause of all offences. So we have to be, as Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, wherever the mind wanders, just bring it back under the control of a higher self. So whenever,
What's creepy about inattentive is that a person can be result orientated. So he's saying Hare Krishna, and you can hear every syllable. He's hearing everything. But it's not from the heart, so it's like a robot. It's just Hare Krishna, but it's in a completely emotionless, blank state. And you think, well, I'm doing the process, but it's not coming from the heart. So, and that's the problem. Sometimes they hear the process and they don't listen to the mechanics.
Yeah, but then also what happens is Maya is very tricky. She can fool the devotees into thinking they're singing from the heart because they're just speaking like that. It's like, I was in one kirtan, and every 2 minutes this boy kept on saying, sing from the heart, sing from the heart. I thought, this has just become mechanical. It's like every couple of mantras you always sing from the heart. It doesn't make people sing from the heart, does it? So just because we say it, so that means that if someone's leading kirtan, and they're saying that, they have to really be doing that themselves. Otherwise, it just becomes another mental platform.
Yeah, to stop and say, can you tell us what you mean by that?
Yeah, it'd be funny, isn't it? Somebody's leading the kirtan going, sing from the heart, and then you're going, what do you mean? What do you mean? In the middle of the kirtan. Of course, imitation is the finest form of flattery. So they probably heard somebody who's really advanced singing that and thinking, oh, that was great kirtan. So if I say that, then it'll become like this. But that's just equating it to some kind of material mechanism, isn't it? It's not like that. When a devotee who's really singing from the heart says that, he can inspire and incite people to sing from the heart because he's giving that. He's got that to give. But if somebody doesn't have that to give and they say it, it's just like a kind of a carbon copy of a £20 note. It doesn't really have the same value. But still, even if our chanting isn't pure, we should chant anyway because The cure for offensive chanting is to not chant less, but to chant more, to chant better. Of course, we can talk all day about chanting, so we'll ask Vrinda's question.
Just a comment on questions. When you got the Vipanatas or the song of the contemplate how this we have a goal and it's an obstacle to the goal, or like they go for broken glass instead of going for the diamond. We're just by contemplating what we're getting, then that means that by giving it up, and then it takes some time, but come convinced and actually go through.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, even if we give up doing so many things in the material world to come to Krishna consciousness, but then sometimes the false ego finds a place to kind of enact. It's like, oh, look how good a kartal player I am. It's like, what really does that matter in the world? Who cares? How good a kartal player you are. You're just thinking that. Everyone else might be thinking, look at the false ego in that guy. Or they're thinking, check out my Madanga playing. So coming to Krishna consciousness is not just a physical relocation of the body to another domicile, but it's actually a change of heart to really think, I want to get out of this world and I want to learn from someone who can take me out of here, how to get out. So in any case, just continuing in the association of devotees and continue to read and chant, then the process will purify us. Even if our motivation is, and Krishna says it, kama sarva kamo va moksha kama udaradi, is that whether one be full of all desires, desire liberation, or have no desires, then at least we should approach Krishna. Because by approaching Krishna, we'll become purified of all the misgivings, and ultimately we will also become a pure devotee. Like Krishna says that in the Bhagavad Gita also, that even if one is unable to follow these principles of Bhakti Yoga, if one is not averse to them, then ultimately they will also achieve the same destination. So we shouldn't be satisfied with ultimately. We should try to be better than that. Not that, oh, well, I'm not averse to them. I wouldn't follow them, but I'm not averse to them. We don't make up some philosophy around it. Otherwise, we'll just be at the same stage next lifetime, and that can go on for many lifetimes. So let's just be better than not averse to them. Let's really try to engage in them. And the most important principle is to always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. So everything which is favourable for remembering Krishna, that is good. And anything which is unfavourable, then that's not so good. That should be avoided. Anything else, or can we?
The poem was a nice, I heard it was a nice thing for an honest person who's just soaking his, what was it? Just soaking his shell.
The sufferings don't last long.
Yeah, soaking don't last long. So I'm reading right now about it, you just see us being cast out in exile, and so you would think, oh, he's an honest person, but he's suffering, it's just in the process. But they have all these wild things happen to them. Arjuna's just gone down to the heaven planets with Indra getting all the weapons, and while he's doing yoga and all them that have been dressed, they can't sleep properly. They just all the time they're inside, just wondering when it's coming up. So even though all the material things were switched, still again what happened, and they were still miserable, even though they had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because live or die, they were in Krishna's company anyway. They have no fear. This is the situation, isn't it? The devotee has no fear, so therefore, whatever the situation is in life, they're always remembering Krishna, so they're content, they're happy. Okay, let's go and get Govinda ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Sri Caitanya Caritamrta ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande. Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki